Okay, we're on chapter 8, the bequeathal, the hollow of the Chaldeans, Ecbatana, Parthia, Parthian Empire. Prince Orodes of Parthia knelt and took the old man's feeble hand. Beside the bed were jars of urine. Belteshazzar was too bedridden to relieve himself in any other way. Orodes emptied and washed them. A nearly spent flame struggled out of a lamp on a nearby table, the same lamp that had been on the table as long as Orodes could remember. "Is this the time you spoke of, when you finally will be going home?" Orodes asked. Belteshazzar's eyes brightened and he opened his mouth to speak, but closed it again before the words came out, as if the concepts were simply too vast. Instead, he nodded his head. Someone somewhere must have been caring for him, since several logs were ablaze in his stone fireplace and were sending out waves of welcome warmth. A tear traced its way down Orodes' cheek. Now, said Belteshazzar, "do not be sad. You will be joining me soon." Belteshazzar laughed when he saw the concern in Orodes' face. No. I don't mean now. 70 years from now, perhaps 100. But even 1,000 years is a blink of an eye to Ahura Mazda, who has no end, no beginning. Be happy for me. I go to see friends. He was waving a bony finger as if to emphasize, "I will tell you something. Glories beyond explanation await us at death." I use the term death only because of its common usage. In truth, it is birth, entering the womb. That is what truly is death, because we do so with all memories cloaked. I am going to miss you, my old fellow, my teacher." The conversation lay there for a while, stalled with a faraway look occupying Belteshazzar's eyes and a barely noticeable rising and falling of his chest. "I was told you have something for me," was what Orodes wanted to say, but it didn't seem appropriate. It would carry the wrong connotation. Belteshazzar spoke again with a great effort, because with each passing moment his body was growing closer, weaker, heavier. But what came out had nothing to do with the bequeathal. "And you returned with your beloved Mithra," is what he said. He had not noticed the wolf until now, and he laughed, a laugh that turned into a frightful coughing fit. "They tell me you took on the entire Roman army," he said after composing himself, "and freed all the animals in the process." "The story is exaggerated." Then tell me how it happened. I love a good story, you know that." "It's a peculiar story," Orodes said, and he told of how he rescued Mithra and freed the animals, and of how he grabbed Mithra's fangs and played the fang game. Mithra growling and wagging his tail. No one noticed the tail banging back and forth, whirling like the windmills of the Greeks. And of how Orodes held off the entire Praetorian Guard with barely more than a sneer, and of how he ended up in the dark of the forest, surrounded by hidden sets of eyes that came visible only when they caught the firelight in just the right way. And he told of how Mithra had been curled up in a ball by his feet, ears picking out the sounds and scents of the forest and the curious creatures that came to watch and investigate, when the animal was suddenly on its feet, back hunched, stepping backward, a low, steady rumble coming out of its mouth. "A cowled figure emerged," Orodes went on. "A man?" The hooded garment reached all the way to the forest floor in a way that suggested he was gliding on air. But it was a woman's voice that spoke. "Your Highness," it said. At its sound, Mithra realized there was no threat and settled back down again. The woman handed forth a bag she had been carrying and told me that there was a traveling pass inside with the emperor's seal on it. She gave me instructions to be at the tomb of Turia at first light morning after next to meet a trade caravan which would be passing through. She said the caravan would be expecting me, and it would be a long journey, with the final destination being the principal city of Ecbatana. There was also food inside the bag. Belteshazzar smiled broadly. "I enjoyed it," he said of the story. "Quite a tale. Good story indeed." "Was the mystery ever solved? Did you ever find out who the woman was?" Orodes shook his head. "A mystery never to be solved, it appears. Very strange. Almost as if someone were watching over me." Belteshazzar smiled and nodded his head in a way that signaled he might have the answer. But before Orodes could ask, Belteshazzar changed the subject. Now, he said, I must tell you something before I leave you, for the time is now near. Belteshazzar closed his mouth and opened it again. The process alone was an effort of will, it seemed. And he spoke the last words Orides would ever hear from his mentor, his friend. I have something to give you, he said. It is something of immense value. Another broad smile spread across old Belteshazzar's face and froze itself in eternity. Belteshazzar was dead. Mithra, head lowered, tail dragging, went up and sniffed the motionless form, sniffed it up and down, and cried softly as he further tested the confusing scent with his tongue. Orides pressed his lips against the cold and lifeless forehead of his friend, his mentor. Belteshazzar's face seemed thinner than it did when it held life, and way too fragile, like a gray and brittle stick that you might find on the forest floor. He fell to his knees and wept. When a man cries, men are highly sensitive creatures, a fact unknown to all except another man. A massive amount of energy is consumed. It caused him to fall onto the floor in a desperate slumber, within which was a vibrator. It fell right by where the body of Belteshazzar was. And within it, there was a vibrating type of paralysis in his body that hurtled its way downward into a stunning moment of causeless fear. Hard to explain. It was like someone had pulled the entire earth out from under him and left him suspended in a place where there was a cacophony of activity, voices, a loud buzzing sound, where before there had been nothing but silence. And it startled him awake. Awake is in quotes. Here, over here, came a voice at nearly the same instant, which in itself would have roused him, had not the buzzing already done so. Another magus? Indeed, standing there, apparently all along, in the shadows, backed by the scrolls themselves, was another magus. The magus stepped forward and bowed, and also kissed the body, and untied and retied its holy waist cord, and uttered, We worship the Fravashi of the Avashah, and we thank you, time-worn form. You have served me well. Then the magus raised his head and continued on with Orides as if nothing out of the ordinary was afoot. Talk to him if you have something to say, he said. He will hear. The magus nodded at the body and moved his head up and down for emphasis. You think so? Yes, I do. Talk to him. Belteshazzar and I used to have these conversations, said Orides, speaking to the unknown magus as if he too were a friend. These arguments about life and death and whether or not life survives death. There is a sect among the Jews called the Sadducees. While they believe in God, they do not believe that we go on after death. They believe that death ends it all. Orides tipped his head toward the body, the dead body. Belteshazzar would tell me all about the wonderful things that would happen after death, how we would take stock of our previous life and of what we learned and about the mistakes we made and what we must do to correct them. And what we must still learn? All nonsense, I would tell him. Orides laughed, but it was a laugh of respect. I used to tell him, prove it to me, and I will believe. I used to say, show me something. Show me something I can believe, that I can touch and taste and smell. Then I will believe. You cannot touch the sun, Belteshazzar would argue back, yet you believe the sun exists. I would answer back. You would answer back this way, finished the strange young magus, that you believe in the sun because you can feel its warmth. And I would remind you that you cannot see the wind. And you would say, but I can feel its force on my face. Orides stood in muted confusion and stared at the young magus and moved closer and thrust his head out like a turtle from its shell to study this strange man. The light fell on his face in an indistinct sort of way, so he was not sure at first. It was an odd profusion of light, not the kind of light that would come from a fireplace, and certainly not the light provided by the sun. Dimmer than that, yet brighter in a way. It was like he could control the light somehow, make it brighter or darker simply by willing it so. Is it you? Asked Orides in a raspy whisper. The face he was looking at was younger, far younger, fuller. But yes, unmistakable, yes. Could it be? Yes. It was the face of Belteshazzar, Daniel, Magus Supreme, the one-time ruler of all Babylon. Is it really you? Yes, said Belteshazzar, it is me. My gift to you, my bequeathal to you, the only thing I have to give, since I am not wealthy, is the proof I promised you, the proof that life goes on, that death is really birth, and that birth is really death. But even at that, I do you a disservice, because there is so much more to God's kingdom. One would be stunned at its vastness and of how many hearts beat within its sphere. Words limit me. And the one who holds the key is Yeshua the Sayushiant, who walks the earth in the land of the Jews this very moment. I want you to go there. I want you to stay and study under him. It is a destiny. It is the destiny of Yeshua to take the sins of the world upon his shoulders. He is coming just now into the full awareness of who he is. Belteshazzar pointed to the wall where the scrolls were shelved. If you would, there, right there, find the scroll, the 58th Yost, it is labeled, and behind it you will find a loose brick. I have hidden a bag of coins there. It is not much compared to what a king can give you, but if you are careful, it should be enough to sustain you during your study. My study? Study? What study? He wondered if Belteshazzar had taken senility with him. My study with whom? What are you talking about? I have already told you, said Belteshazzar. Have you not been listening? Sayushiant, Yeshua, is his given name, the one who can give us the key to free ourselves from the illusions of mortality and the cycle of birth and death, so that we might reign at the right hand of Ahura Mazda in Mazda's kingdom of magnificence. Orides began to tingle in a way indescribable. Every appendage was suddenly afire with bliss, every nerve, every vessel, every cell. He looked over at the dead body, still there. Then he looked at the man standing. The man standing, smiling, looked like Belteshazzar, more so than the dead body. He also saw his own body, its chest rising and falling, mouth open, rasping in and out somnambulistic breaths, as though benumbed in a deep trance, on the floor beside the dead body of Belteshazzar. So much more, reiterated Belteshazzar, so much more. The bliss burning inside Orides was brightening the illusion of, giving it another illusion, the illusion of a strange type of consanguinity to all that surrounded him, to all surrounding objects, and to all people. And there were other people in the room who had not been there before, he suddenly realized, a young woman with long raven hair, and a man with a white beard, and a man with a black-streaked silver beard. A bald eagle floated down and perched itself on Belteshazzar's shoulder. Sayushiant? Guessed Orides? Yes, it appears Sayushiant has joined us as well, said Belteshazzar, and he pointed to the young woman with the raven hair and said something remarkable. And this stunning beauty, my dear boy, is your mother. In her most recent going out, her name was Rachel, but we all know her as Silva. Your father is a lucky man, I'll tell you. If I was 5,000 years younger, present upon Belteshazzar's lips was the sparkle of a smile that revealed the charm and the wit that was so typical of him. Indeed, it was Belteshazzar. And gone were the wanderings of senility that had begun to obfuscate his brilliance as the physical brain was winding down. Happiness veritably blazed out from Rachel. She opened her arms to her son. It was more than an embrace. Mother and son quite literally melted into one another and formed a fire-like pillar extending into the earth in one direction and up into the heavens in the other. And the bliss burning through Orides increased by exponential proportions, frightening. It was so powerful. Sayushiant the eagle floated down to where Mithra was lying, head between his paws, one eye closed, one eye open. Ah, my dear bird, soothed Belteshazzar, I am afraid you will have to wait a while before you will be able to play with your good friend the wolf. I am sorry, but he cannot see you. It was clear that Mithra was looking at an empty room only, that his physical eyes were not seeing the three people in the eagle. He twitched an ear and gave a whine, being none the less aware that something was not quite right in the room. Is all this real? Asked Orides. It is the only thing that is real, said Belteshazzar. Life in the body is the illusion, and what limits us by the reflection of light. I think I might be beginning to believe that. It is true. but it matters not whether or not you believe it. Now, if I might focus for a moment, the one thing you must do, and I cannot emphasize how important this is to go to the land of the Jews and study and learn under the man who is the Sayoshiant, born Yeshua ben Yosef. Remember that name, Yeshua ben Yosef. Yeshua, the son of Yosef. He is the one who knows. He looks young, but he is ancient. His goings out number as many as there are stars in the sky. As your prophet Enoch wrote, he is the Most High, come to take on a cloak of flesh and blood, in order to teach us by word and by example. Willingly he does so, because no sin is to be found in him. He is as pure as the driven snow. You must learn from him. I am afraid my father the king has other plans for me. Belteshazzar shooed away the objection with a wave of his hand. Pooh on the king. A greater king has greater plans. I have made arrangements for you to travel to Judea. I did so before I discarded my body. Yeshua divides his time between the compound of the Essenes and the Judean wilderness and the temple in Jerusalem. One of these two places is where you will find him, more than likely. But even if he's not there, you've got to find him. He'll be somewhere in Judea. Now, but here's the important thing: there is to be a summit of leaders from the kingdom of the known world. All of the leaders of the known world, from all of the kingdoms of the known world, are going to be meeting at a place called Machaerus near the Dead Sea. And I have arranged with your mother and father for you to be a part of the Parthian delegation. Gifts are expected because a banquet will be held in honor of King Antipas, tetrarch of the Galilean regions. It's his birthday. You will be traveling there with your mother and father, the king and queen. That will be your passage and your excuse to travel to the land of Judea. But I have instructions from my father to report to the Armenian front. He expects you to leave for the Armenian front after you return, Belteshazzar said. He had a peculiar glow in his eyes that might as well have said, if you return. Your sister Nahid will be coming with you as well. Do you remember how she always used to run away pretending to look for Sayoshiant? You remember that? Belteshazzar held his stomach as it shook with laughter. Oh, how that used to anger you. Now the fantasy shall become reality, because she too will be learning from the Sayoshiant. The eagle stayed behind to play for a time with an unawares Mithra, but the rest of them, Belteshazzar and his entourage, disappeared through a set of double doors into an explosion of light, yellows, reds, blinding white, shades of blue and purple. Ordes whistled for Mithra and tried to follow, but his eyes popped open and he was back in his body, where he was left to view life once again through the limitations of the flesh and of what could be discerned from sound-impacted air against the ears and the reflection of light upon the eyes, and to wonder if what had happened at all. Had it only been a dream? The bliss was also gone, and the brilliant colors were replaced by the ghostly dimness of dying fireplace embers, and the cacophony of cheerful activity and all its wonderful people were replaced by the foul emptiness of a cold room and a dead body. Mithra popped up and stood tall and pointed his ears forward and looked at something that wasn't there, but it must have been there. It was a tiny whiff of air, and he howled, mournful and low. Mithra's howls consisted of 3 octaves, low to high and low again, the middle sounding almost like a child screaming, the low end akin to a baritone. It was a cry that could be heard for miles, over 10 miles in the open forest.